Azadin stood atop the fallen soldier, his figure silhouetted against the flickering light of nearby flames. From behind, Medium's voice, filled with concern, rang out, "Azadin, did you defeat it?" He turned slightly, his expression calm yet resolute, and replied in a steady voice, "No, this is just the beginning." His sharp eyes quickly scanned the surroundings, before he pointed toward a nearby tent. "You two, get your food from the table in that tent." He directed Medium and Ismail towards the tent where he and Derek had been eating earlier. Ismail hesitated, confusion etched on his face. "Food, in this situation?" Azadin's voice rose in firm command. "Of course. There are so many people starving to death in this world. You shouldn't take food so lightly. Go take it." Before Ismail could respond, Medium screamed, "Azadin, behind you." Azadin spun around just in time to see one of the muted soldiers rising again. Its grotesque form moved unnaturally as it swung its decayed hand at Azadin, who leapt back effortlessly to avoid the strike. The other muted soldier stood alongside it, both chanting in guttural voices, "Meat, hungry, living meat." The screams of the women in the merchant caravan filled the air, mingling with screams from all around the town. The mercenaries, who had spiders implanted in their bodies, possessed terrifying strength and could slaughter the soldiers instantly. However, none of them could overcome their hunger and began consuming humans. Azadin studied them, his sharp gaze narrowing as he noticed spiders falling from their open mouths along with drool. He thought to himself, "They're still moving despite their condition. The spiders must be controlling their nervous systems." The two muted soldiers lunged at Azadin, growling. Calm and calculating, Azadin dropped his spear and bent down to pick up a piece of cloth from the ground. A confident smile crept across his face as he said, "Then what will happen if I send shocks through their bodies, I wonder?" One of the muted soldiers swiped at him, but Azadin swiftly dodged the attack, his movements fluid and precise. Holding the cloth in one hand, he threw it toward one of the muted soldiers. As his other hand touched the cloth midair, a sudden surge of energy rippled through it, producing a shockwave. The electrified cloth struck the muted soldier, sending it crashing to the ground as spiders spilled out of its collapsing body. Just as Azadin prepared for his next move, a spider-like leg shot toward him. New long legs, resembling an exoskeleton, grew from their backs to make it easier for them to tear apart the corpses and consume them. He dodged again, only for another leg to lunge at him from the other side. He leapt back, narrowly avoiding the attack. The two muted soldiers began to mutate further, their grotesque forms evolving. Each now had two massive spider-like legs protruding from their backs, and the one that had been hit by the shockwave now bore a gaping hole in its torso. Azadin observed them with a faint smile. He evolved. Azadin was forced to back away, but the mercenaries began moving and tore away the cloth on them. "This is bad," Azadin mumbled, his voice low with concern. Suddenly, a torch was thrown towards Azadin. He caught it effortlessly and faced the advancing spider-muted soldier. With a swift motion, he struck them with the blazing torch. The creatures shrieked in agony as their grotesque legs caught fire, flailing wildly and screeching, "Hot! Hot!" From the side, Ismail joined the fray, hurling torches at the creatures. Together, they formed a ring of fire, trapping the spider-muted soldiers within the inferno. The creatures thrashed and screamed, "Yug," as the fire licked at their monstrous forms, the tiny spiders within them vulnerable to the intense heat. The bugs, susceptible to flame, could be thoroughly burnt with just a little exposure. Azadin nodded in approval. "Nice work. Make sure the fire doesn't reach the merchants' tents," he instructed, his voice steady. He mused to himself, "This isn't half bad." The other merchants, witnessing the scene, shouted in excitement, "Look over there, the fire's working on them." Inspired, they began throwing their own torches at the muted soldiers, yelling, "Burn those bastards." The flames engulfed the muted soldiers, their tortured screams echoing through the air. "And no, fires." They groaned in agony. Azadin, holding his torch, stepped forward calmly. "Ah, you should stay still," he said with chilling calmness. He thrust the torch into the face of one of the burning muted soldiers. "You should stay nice and toasty." The spiders tried to escape the mercenaries' bodies as the heat shocked them, abandoning their safe house and food source in panic. However, if they attempted to hide inside another body, they would burrow into the flesh of a human who had not yet mutated, causing rejection and pain. The muted soldiers writhed in pain, their bodies collapsing under the intense heat. As the last one fell to the ground, consumed by flames, Azadin stood tall, taking a deep breath. "Phew," he exhaled, his composure unshaken. He turned to Medium, his tone urgent. "What about the food and water?" Med-I-am, with a proud grin, held up their haul and boasted, "We got everything we could find." Ismail, still catching his breath, asked with concern, "Should we bring the goats over?" Med-I-am stepped forward with a confident air, moving Ismail aside, and pointed at herself with a show-off demeanor. "Hold on, weren't we really useful just now?" she asked, a smug grin spreading across her face. As if waiting for validation, she turned to Azadin, adding, "You'll continue needing us, so you should just take us in as." Her words were cut short as Azadin snorted at Medium's request. "If I take you in as a servant, what happened here today becomes my responsibility." "You beat them up, despite being a servant. You probably didn't know the Savin family was behind them, right? Are you trying to draw me into a confrontation with the Savin family?" "And no, it isn't like that. I just couldn't stand it when they insulted you like that," Med-I-am responded, visibly shocked by Azadin's questioning. Azadin replied, "Sure, and I do thank you for that. However, for me to remain grateful, you cannot become my servant. I would be thankful if you beat them up as Med-I-am of the Ethar. However, if you were my servant, I would need to discipline you. Should I hit you on the cheek?" "Yuck, that is too much. Why are you so kind to the people of Hubris and like this to me?" Med-I-am protested. Azadin answered, "Because you aren't a civilian." Azadin halted as the Emperor's voice swooped down, perching on his shoulder. The spectral entity spoke, "Azadin." Azadin focused on the Emperor's voice, his expression intent. "Is there a new contractor?" he inquired, urgency lacing his steady voice. "Yes, but," the Emperor's voice began with a note of concern. "Where are they?" Azadin interrupted sharply, before the entity could finish. Hesitating, the Emperor's voice responded, "West." "Ah, they just stopped breathing." Frustration flashed across Azadin's features. "Damn it," he muttered, picking up his sword as the spectral bird took flight. He glanced at Med-I-am and Ismail. "You two, prepare the fire. We're heading to the western gates." With a forceful leap, Azadin dashed toward the west. Med-I-am watched him vanish into the distance, her arms crossed, a wry smile playing on her lips. "He's just flat out ordering us around at this point," she remarked. Ismail, still dazed by the rapid developments, murmured, "Yeah." As Azadin confronted the relentless horde of muted soldiers, his blade sliced cleanly through one of them. However, before he could catch his breath, another soldier lunged from behind. Azadin dodged the attack with fluid, calculated movements. "It just won't die," he thought, frustration evident. A human would have been knocked out long ago. The mutated soldiers continued their assault, their grotesque, spider-like legs flailing wildly. Azadin deftly dodged each blow, observing their monstrous transformations with a critical eye. Not to mention, these guys just keep mutating, and their numbers are increasing rapidly. "TSK. They're so gross," he thought, evading yet another attack. "I won't even be able to reach the contractor at this rate." Suddenly, a lightning-charged arrow zipped through the air, striking a muted soldier. The electrical impact incinerated it. Azadin turned to see Med-I-am, her expression triumphant. "I knew it," she exclaimed, her fist clenched. "I knew lightning would be effective, considering their weakness to fire." Her excitement quickly faded as exhaustion overtook her. Med-I-am began to stumble, her strength waning rapidly. Ismail darted to her side, catching her just before she could fall to the ground. "Med-I-am," he exclaimed, his voice thick with concern. Azadin observed the pair for a moment, before addressing Med-I-am with a firm but appreciative tone. "Med-I-am," he began, "be careful. Flower Bird Wind Moon is a colorless magic. Lightning magic, which creates electricity, is too inefficient. Just because it's in a magic book doesn't mean it's always practical to use it. However, it's impressive that you can use Thunderbolt at your age. Truly, that is commendable, especially for an Ethar." Medium's eyes lit up with surprise and delight. "Right? There aren't many people my age who can do it. With this beauty and talent, even when I think about myself. I have to admit, I am a bit of a sinful woman," she said, her eyes shining with a mix of pride and hope. Azadin, standing tall, continued with commanding authority, "That being said, the beauty of nature is a grimoire. It's best not to use it often. Go rest now." Her joy momentarily dampened, Med-I-am looked away, disappointment shadowing her features. Ismail, watching this exchange, clenched his fists, his expression darkening with frustration. It was fine since there were only two, but what if there were more, he thought. Azadin couldn't use magic, so there was a limit to how much he could do alone. Med-I-am is pushing herself this much, just to get accepted by him, Ismail reflected, anger stirring within him. Unable to contain his frustration any longer, Ismail blurted out, his voice strained, "Azadin, wasn't the contractor already dead?" Continuing forward with the torch in his hand, Azadin responded without turning back, "Yes. Ismail's frustration boiled over as he shouted into the night, then why are we doing all this? Azadin did not halt his stride. He tossed the torch onto a nearby muted soldier, setting the grotesque form ablaze. Without missing a beat, he replied, a contract is a contract, even if they're dead. I can't just leave without verifying. Ismail glanced at Medayam, who shared his concern, before pressing further, his voice quieter yet still laden with worry, but there's a limit to burning these things. Azadin stopped and turned to face them, his expression resolute. You're right, he acknowledged, gripping his sword tightly. His eyes glinted with unwavering determination as he added, that's why I intend to kill their leader instead.